Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Creating in Fortnite. I am going to be your host today, Tina. Some of you might be familiar with me. I'm actually the Unreal Engine community manager. Shane can't make it with us today, so everybody give her some love and well wishes in the meantime. But for now, I'm taking over. This is my stream now. But here with me today, I have the wonderful Devin, who is also the community manager, but for Rocket Racing. Would you like to introduce yourself, Devin? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's get it going.
Yeah, thanks, Tina, for having me on today. My name is Devin Connors. I'm based out of our San Diego, California studio, and along with Rocket Racing, I help out in a few different ways, but really work on all things Rocket for Epic Games. So Rocket Racing, Rocket League, Rocket League Sideswipe, all sorts of cool stuff. And yeah, happy to talk a little bit about Rocket Racing today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here. There's so much to dig into, and I selfishly am very excited to get into it. But before we do, we have a little bit of news that we're going to walk through. So give me just a moment while I get that set up. But yeah, it's a lot. A lot has happened, y'all. So I'm not going to take too much time on this because I know we're probably all excited to get into the main meat of the matter for the day, but let's go ahead and get this set up. I should have my screen set up. There we go. So first to start off, we'll go through a little bit of the 29.3 update here. So obviously I'm not going to read everything that you see here. If you would like to get all of the information, make sure that you check out this main page itself. But some of the highlights, there were some new patchwork devices that have been added, as well as some third-person control updates. Those are really, really exciting. Definitely dig into those if you get the chance, as well as additional device updates. Spanning all the way from stuff like player spawners, storm beacon, damage types, all kinds of stuff. There's way more available here. So again, make sure you check out the main page to get all of that information. Some updated Frosty Fortress starter island, modular variant for tactical assault rifles, exposed UMG widgets to verse, so on and so forth. Lots of really good stuff that came out with this update. So make sure you check that out so you can get the full updates there. Then we'll scoot on over to our next one. Maybe. No, my hotkeys. There they go. Next up for the 29.4 update, we had some updates to the new devices for Lego Islands, as well as some patch assets and UEFN for the Patchwork Instrument Player, Patchwork Audio Device updates, Olympic and Underworld Chess, camera control updates, lots of new stuff for Verse as well, as always. So exciting to see Verse just continue to grow and expand. Ball spawner device design examples, button device examples, lots of device design examples actually came out with this one. So again, lots of really great stuff there. And then last but certainly not least, 30 came out as well. So for this one, stuff mainly happened around the character devices and character device controllers. So that one is really exciting to me. I'm really excited to see how people continue to expand on those and what they do with tools like that, as well as Take Recorder is now available in UEFN thanks to the 30 update. So check those out. Lots of really, really great things there. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about real quick, again, before we just get into the main topic of the day, is the creator feedback program. So I know a lot of you have been asking about ways that you can get feedback back to us, and here it is. You can do it right here. All you have to do, you just come over here. There's an application form that you'll fill out. Main thing to keep in mind, this is open for everyone. It doesn't matter how many players you have, any of that. If you have feedback, we want it. Make sure that you do keep in mind, of course, this is mostly centered around upcoming features, tools, and updates before they're released. But if you have thoughts and opinions on those, make sure you come and give us your feedback. It is very important to us. We're constantly listening to what you have to say, evolving, updating, growing with what you need. So take a second to go through that, fill it out when you've got a second. And yeah, that's, wow, I'm out of breath.
A lot of fun, hey, a lot of fun stuff going on the Create side right now. Absolutely.
Yes, For sure. All right, but that is basically all of the main updates there. Anything that stuck out to you in particular, Devin?
Yeah, I mean, alongside everything we're doing on UEFN, I know 29.40 was a fun update for Rocket Racing, added some cool new tracks to the game, Python and Seaside Farms. We're still in the middle of Neon Rush, which is a really cool event we have going on the racing side. Bunch of new tracks, a bunch of creator made tracks that we're going to be talking about with the gang here in a little bit. I think of everything going on in the ecosystem, I mean, the patchwork devices are always really interesting to me, and how players are using it to make music and all sorts of cool stuff. More third person controls are always good. I know we've been talking a lot about different camera angles for players to fool around with. We've talked about first person controls a little bit as well. So, yeah, lots of cool stuff going on. But happy to talk about rocket racing today with the team we have here.
Yeah, absolutely. With that in mind, I know, of course, this is what everyone is here for, right? So, without further ado, I will not make you wait any longer. However, I'm a liar because I am going to make you wait longer because we have a trailer that we're going to show. So, we'll pop into that and then we'll pull the team on and we'll get this going. Oh my gosh, incredible. All right, well, here we are. We have our friends here with us now. Devin, I was wondering if I could hand it off to you. Maybe you would like to go around and have the team introduce themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's kick it over to Galen. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great. Yeah, just happy to be here and happy to be on stream and talk about all these tools we've been creating.
And what do you do? What do you do with the rocket racing team?
So I'm a gameplay programmer. I work on a variety of different systems, particularly when it comes to user generated content. I worked with the typical UEFN team to get everything ready. Our whole new templates where you actually load into Rocket Racing and its uh, feature set is designed specifically to our devices and what we allow for the creation of tracks. So I worked on a lot of that underlying code as well as worked on the underlying race systems that the race manager utilizes to actually create the flow of the game and have you as an actual racer and move through it. So kind of the connection between the actual underlying systems and then deviceifying them here to UEFN and getting it all out to the creators so they can utilize it.
Very cool, very cool. And we also have Donnie with us today. How's it going?
Going well. Also happy to be here and be brought on talk about what we've been working on.
Yeah. Speaking of which, so similar to Galen, what are you doing with the team nowadays?
So I am a senior QA analyst on the Rocket Racing team. I was one of the founding members of the Rocket Racing QA team, working on it for launch, and then I transitioned over, and I'm now the owner of basically all the things we're going to show today, of all the Rocket Racing UEFN tools, the template, and basically I work on just making sure it's all tested, covered. We are hitting our quality goals and getting users the best tools we can give them.
Shout out QA for sure. And last but not least, we have our friend Quinn here. He's going to be on audio today. He's going to be looking at questions for us in chat and doing some technical expertise. But yeah, Quinn, tell us a little bit about yourself.
How's it going, guys? I'm Quinn Hovey. I'm a gameplay engineer also at Psyonix. I have been working on the amazing track tool that I'm sure everyone has used a little bit now. Was working on that for the past year and a half, and now it's finally released. And if any of you were at a GDC, I was there to kind of help you guys show off that.
Very cool. Yeah, I think we can. I think we can roll right into it, and we're going to start with an overview on some of these rocket racing tools we just showed the trailer for. So take it away, gang.
Yeah, so basically just want to go over everything that we've created for you guys and that you are able to utilize. We're going to start by just pulling up some of the documentation that we have here. Um, Essentially, we've got a nice set of documentation that's been written out that can lead you through creating your first rocket racing island, and essentially brings you all the information you need on the devices and everything. This is the landing page where it kind of gives you an overview, what you need to know on how to make a project when you load up UEFN, where our templates are, how you actually choose one and get started. From there, there's a full tutorial that this can lead you on. That it'll teach you all the things, some of the things we will teach you today, as well as we'll give you some more advanced tools throughout this session. But you could follow this this documentation right here to create that first track, and we also have nice documentation on each one of the devices. So if you ever have a question exactly how to use, such as the EMP hazard or the elimination volume or something that you're interested in using but want a little bit more information on it, there's a documentation right here that goes over the user options and everything you can do with them. But who wants to talk about documentation as much when we can show you exactly how to utilize this stuff and make some cool tracks? So here we can see just regular UEFN, and in the island templates, there's this rocket racing category. And from here, you can always create a competitive racetrack or a speedrun racetrack. Those are both of our main modes. Main difference just being how they initialize some of those starting devices. Essentially, you can make the competitive if you want the full race, trying to finish line, collide with people, take each other out, have a good time, or speedrun, beat your best time, and try to get on those leaderboards with your session. So we're gonna create a competitive racetrack here for you guys to show off some of these tools. And so Donnie's just gonna make this here, and we're gonna create one from scratch. So as this loads up, it's gonna place the required devices to the point where you could just press play right off the bat. It's got everything you need, but it's a good base point to just go anywhere your imagination can take you from there. So while this loads up, we'll just talk about a little bit of the base devices that are just going to show up here. And so just some typical things that come into the island that are making it a rocket racing island are, as you can see here, we have the starting track with some checkpoints, some player starts, and you basically could run this right as is, and you would teleport between those checkpoints and be able to complete a race. But so first thing we're going to highlight is what makes this a rocket racing template in the first place. The coup de grace is essentially this race manager right here. This race manager, you're going to either have a competitive or a speedrun race manager, is what is controlling all that racing flow. Like I was saying, it's what's putting you in the car, it's what's keeping you racing, putting you to the post match, getting everyone there at the beginning, actually having you flow, be able to go through spectator modes and all that. That's all been deviceified simply that you just have to have this in your project and it determines the mode. Nice thing about it is your template is not locked. If you chose competitive and you wanted to switch to speedruns, you could always just delete the competitive race manager and replace with a speedrun race manager, and now you have all the logic a speedrun needs. There might be a few different validations that you might need to change, like competitive requires 12 player starts, speedrun does not. So if you change one you've already created, you just will have to follow those validations. But you've got some nice little options here. You can change the number of laps you like. You can also just set a few different things up, like music
eliminate or the eliminate offset distance.
Yeah, so this elimination offset distance is essentially essentially creating a killing floor for your vehicles. It's going to be based on the lowest point on your spline. So wherever your track goes to, lower than that is going to be a Z kill floor. You can bring that up, you can bring that down, however much you need if you would like to change it. The default value should be relatively good enough that you don't need to mess with it. And
It's like
yeah, so
it's a very scary sounding but very crucial component, right?
Yeah.
yes,
Killing floor.
very crucial.
The
I mean, there could
eliminate.
be a point where you want to get rid of it and use things off track really far or things like that. You could just make that value really high.
Mm-hmm. Or have them not even like barely leave the track and eliminate immediately and make it very, very small.
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of that really plays into kind of the environment you're dropping this track into, right? Depending on how much space you have to play with.
Yeah, and so from there you've got the player starts, which are essential to where the racer's actually going to go. And you're going to have 12 of those right off here on the bat. And the only thing you have to set on them, this will already be set up, but is the priority. Priority is just saying which one is gotten by the first player who loads in, second, and so on and so forth. There's already a set lineup, but you can change this to however you'd like it. They're each individually movable. And so you can just mess with it to however you would like your race to start. But that's kind of the initial setup. That's all just there doing the work for you, minimal options. The real power of this template and creating the tracks really comes from the track tool itself and how that can create all these beautiful things you want to see. So we're going to show off a bit of the track tool and how it works. So we have essentially a very new window that comes up when you select a track tool. It's called the Style Edit widget. For some reason, I wasn't seeing what Donnie was doing for a sec. Sorry. So this Style Edit widget. Yep. This Style Edit widget is what allows you to completely customize the track. So when you actually select a track, this Style Editor widget will pop up, and you can put this over to the side to start editing the track yourself and mess with the spline points and everything that you want to do.
It will reopen, like put it to the side so you don't lose it. And if you close it, it will reopen every time you click a spline point. So it is docking it or putting somewhere so you don't get annoyed every time you change something, close it, click the next spline, it pops back up. It's good to just, I generally always put it over here near the details panel, but put it where you want.
And so since we're going to be showing the editing of the splines, we want to call out some really cool editor preferences you can change that'll make editing splines much easier. So if you go to your editor preferences, in editor preferences, you can just search in the search bar spline, and it will show up a set of, at the bottom in viewports, a set of options that you can change. And essentially, this first option allows you to change the size of the nodes of the spline points. So the little squares, to actually click on them, you can make them bigger. We recommend almost going to max when you're working on a big track, because then it just makes it so much easier to work with them. You can also change, max is 20. And so you can see it just made the nodes a lot bigger behind there. You can also change the spline width itself, so you can actually see the spline itself and how it's transforming. You can make it super large and too large where it's not even useful, or you can bring it to a size that's just easier to click on, especially when you're working on a track that you don't have track pieces on and you're trying to edit that spline. This makes it much easier. The third option down here allows you to also change the squares for the tangents as well, so that you can actually, right now they're super little. Donnie wouldn't even be able to click on them from this zoomed out. Now Donnie has full control over them. So just some really cool editor preferences that'll help you all create more tracks. Going from there, we're gonna just go a little bit of an overview on this track tool itself. So we have two tabs here in the Style Editor widget, the device and track tabs. The device is just some overarching settings you can set on a track itself. You can see there are different types of tracks. Now, this is the primary track. There's a secondary and a cosmetic track. Actually knowing the difference between these 3 track types is essential to making your track play as well as you want it to. The primary track is what defines the actual major racing line of your entire track. It's where positional tracking is all based off of, and it's where a lot of your respawns happen inherently before secondary splines and things like that. So you want that primary spline to follow your entire track. It should go from start to finish so that player tracking and everything works great. Even if there are sections you decide to use a lot of secondary tracks and don't want to have the primary be a track itself, you still should have it go through your track. That way positional tracking still is nice along the sections with a lot of secondary tracks. Secondary tracks will actually change the color to blue, so they're quite easy to see. Therefore, secondary paths, a path that is not primary and people can go on. They have all the same logic that the primary has on allowing the player to respawn on them, and they actually have unique logic for positioning so that based on their position in relation to the primary, it knows exactly where you are in position to other people on the track. So, and that's
we'll
actually
show that
how
later as well in detail.
Yep, we'll show the
If there's
connection.
one thing we know players love, it's a good shortcut in racing tracks for sure.
Yeah,
it's true. So you want to use these secondary tracks to create those shortcuts. Third type being a cosmetic track. That is exactly as it sounds. It is completely cosmetic. It has no logic on it at all. It's not treated as something that the race cares about. It's just cosmetic. You can use it for set dressing or to cover up something if you're trying to create something unique that you don't want the spline to deform, and you're just trying to make some nice set dressing track pieces. Or little ramps on a track piece is another great use for a cosmetic track. Yeah, and from there we just got a few other options. So I'm just having a little trouble reading what the option is. Give me 1 second.
Show spline point numbers.
There we go. Show spline point numbers, which just allows you to see the spline points, and you can set the track to loop here. We're not going to show that right this second because this track will not loop properly in its current state, but you can also right click and do that specifically on a node later. So we'll show that. But moving on from there, you've got the track tab itself, and the track tab of the style editor widget is where you've got the main portion of what you can do.
It's the main course. This is the tab you'll be in most of the time as you are creating.
Yep. And so basically what you'll see here is all the data that you want to see for the spline and the tangents and things like that. You don't have to utilize the text itself. You can just utilize the nice widgets of actually changing these. So from here, Donnie can extend out the track, mess with it, deform it. You can see the numbers changing on the right. And you can also change what the road shape is, what style it is. At the bottom there, you can see there's ones with hazard lanes, ones without. You can go tunnel. You can essentially do all sorts of different stuff. This is all defined by that theme we saw on the device tab, and that theme just determines what track palette is used to utilize this. Right now there's only one theme, but there's so many options even within this theme. You can see that one of the powerful parts of this tool is that it's inherently transitioning between those meshes for you. So as Donnie has made this this sort of half pipe, you can see it transitions directly to the next ones very smoothly, and those track pieces are already there and you don't have any breaks in the track. It's really nice for tunnels as well. You have the entrances and exits already set up for you to whatever track piece you have on either side.
And I'm curious, watching you use these tools and you're extending out the space of track, kind of raising it up and down like a ramp. Can you also add like a twist, or to use a racing term, like more of a camber in the turns with this tool as well? Or is that like a totally different kind of track piece that you would have to drop in?
Yes, you can. So everything on this track, another part of the power of this spline tool is it's spawning track meshes in segments and then
You see the
deforming
segments
those. So
right here.
what Donnie can do here is to make a turn, Donnie can pull the tangents to the side and pull the track piece out a little bit, and essentially you'll see right here it's deforming that and actually changing and spawning segments as it needs to make sure nothing is deformed in a bad way. But you can immediately create these nice turns. You can shorten or lengthen that tangent to create tighter or longer curves to the turn, and you can just
be
see
careful
that
not to bring
right
it
there.
too close, because that can deform the geometry, because again, it's the math it's doing.
And I did briefly see one question about killing yourself, not just on the Z kill volume floor, on telling the player to get off track. You can actually see that option right here. This is the off track radius. It's set at 1,000. If the player goes too far off the track that they are currently active on,
Yep.
either secondary, primary, it will actually bring up a thing telling you've moved away from track. Please return to track. And so that's another way to control people moving too far off the current section of track they are driving. And so from there, one of the things I didn't mention, how Donnie's actually adding points to this is just a little hotkey. Donnie's holding Alt and then pulling off a previous one. That's just the typical duplicate in UEFN shortcut, but it works directly off the splines, and it will maintain the options of the previous spline point that you pulled off, which will use an advanced option stable roll that you might see there in a bit to show that off.
Yep. And as
well
you see,
the...
I had set this spline point to a different road shape than the one it was touching, and so when I dragged off, we got a flat road instead of a banked road.
And so this is kind of the meat of the tool right here, on you're just utilizing these spline points and these tangents to create whatever you want. And you can just do everything with the drag and drops like we just did, or you can utilize some additional fancy tools we're going to go over here in a sec. So to start with, you can notice the spline point at the very top of the style editor widget. There's a spline point like set of tools. These tools can move you between spline points. You can easily select the last or the first spline point. If you're making a really big track, that's really helpful to help you quickly get back to the start. You can click the first one, click F to recenter on it, and now suddenly you're back at the start of your track or end, things like that. You can move to the next spline point. You can select all spline points, all sorts of little things that'll help. And that's kind of, there's one specific one in here we're about to go over. I'm going to talk about secondary splines here, and then I'm going to show you a unique tool right there that's going to help you create some secondary splines. Essentially, Donnie's going to create us a secondary track by, instead of dragging in a track, which is one way to create a secondary track, if you have a section that of the track that you would like to just cut into a secondary track, you can select the spline point you want and click this little option over here called split nodes. And when you do that, a little dialog will come up warning you. Make sure you want to do this when you do it, because it's hard to undo. It will just convert that part of the track to secondary. But as we see here, Donnie will click yes on that, and boom, now suddenly that whole section of the track from that spline point on has now been turned secondary. This can be a really useful tool when just trying to split off a track, where you can design it one way and then quickly split it. Now, for the sake of just talking briefly about positional tracking, Donnie, can you move that secondary track to the left or right of the primary track and show these connection points?
Yeah, hold on.
So one thing you can see as Donnie's moving the track, you can see those blue lines that are connecting the end and start point of that secondary track to the primary track. that is a visualization on what some of this underlying logic is doing for positional tracking. Essentially, that secondary track is recording where its start and end distance on the primary spline is. And then while a player is driving on this secondary track, they're utilizing the ratio of how far they are along that secondary track to determine exactly where they are in relation to the primary track. That is why it is extremely necessary for your primary track to go throughout your whole track. If you don't have the primary track going through it and you just end the primary track and continue the rest of your stuff with secondaries, your positional tracking is going to stop at that end primary track point. So just something to call out, just to make sure that your positional tracking is nice. But now let's say Donnie wanted to actually make this a Y split off of where the track is going. So Donnie can do some really cool stuff here with some extra right click options. So Donnie can essentially move the track, the primary track, to do whatever Donnie wants. And then wherever Donnie is wanting to connect the secondary, Donnie can make sure there is a spline point there. First, can right click anywhere along the spline and click add spline point here. That's really helpful, so you don't have to add to the end or and readjust everything. You can just right click anywhere on the spline and be like, add me one here. So Donnie's going to add a spline point right here. And then Donnie's going to want to attach the secondary spline to that spline point to make it really nice. Here's where some new right click options come in that are really helpful. So Donnie can right click the spline point itself. Now this can be difficult. I don't think you're quite on the spline point there.
No,
so this is the
spline point.
Oh,
I think.
Usually there are a few more options. I believe it
No,
says like
I
delete.
think...
Oh, because this is the first spline point.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going on. So you can then click snap and align, and this has some of the regular snap and align options that are there for all objects, but there's a few extra ones for spline points. So right here Donnie can click snap spline point to nearest spline point. Now suddenly that's going to snap that directly to that spline point we created where we want that connection, but you can see it's just kind of turning off of it. It's not following the way we want the track to go. So Donnie can now right click and do the snap and align and do align to nearest spline point. That will now align this to follow the tangents of that spline point. Look at how beautifully...
Even changes the style.
Yep. Look at how beautifully that now connected it. But
and
here,
I'm just curious. In every case, when you're adding a secondary that's like directly attached, you have to do snap then align, right? Or can you kind of bypass the snap and go right into an alignment if it's already kind of positioned right where it was?
You could just do align. Snap is just helpful to line yourself up, but if you would like to line it up in a different way and then have it align, you can align it to the nearest spline point. Caveat just being it does it to the nearest spline point, so make sure you're at least close to the spline point you're trying to align it to.
Right.
And then you can also, if you're like, oh, it's clipping in, there's a bunch of style options of, oh, I'm clicking the wrong spline point. If I just go back to the primary and select that, this is where the style goes in, and you can change like, okay, I don't want guardrail there, so now it can transition so you're not running into a guardrail, and that's a lot cleaner.
And so this just gives you a lot more, those right click menus just give you a lot more functionality that help you create some of this quick stuff without having to manually do it. And so to highlight a bit more of the power of that right click menu, so we've seen some of it, we're gonna create another one, which is Donnie's gonna create a kind of moundy hill here, just by creating a few different points and just essentially just making ups and downs and all sorts of variations. Now, sometimes we're doing this manually, but sometimes while creating something just coming off of the previous piece you were doing, it's creating a rotation you don't really like. That's where what we're about to do is going to be really useful for. And this is for flattening pieces together. So as Donnie now has deformed a bunch of stuff, Donnie can now select these 3 spline points that they made, making sure actually what is important is you want the last one selected to be the one that you want the height to be. In this case, Donnie wants it to be that last one. So they can right click And then you can see here what I was talking about earlier. There are a little bit more options on every spline node besides the root node, where you can delete and add and things like that. But what Donnie's doing here is in the align and snap, you can do the, I can't read it very well. What does it say, Donnie?
Snap and align and snap to last selected Z.
Yep, so when Donnie clicks that, it'll snap all the points to the last selected Z, and you'll see what happens here.
Oh, I
Well, we had
accidentally
a
had
few
that
more
one.
selected.
We had
so
more
that
selected than I
happened.
thought. Yep.
But you can see how it did bring all of them to that last selected.
If I just do this, just add selected. If I do that again, using this to add next spline point to current selection, and then I do this, snap and align, last selected Z.
And so that brought them up. Again, we used the connection point. I think really, so just Control Z that really quick. Do that again, just reverse order where you select the connection point as the last one. And you'll see that this will show you that it matters which order that you choose it in, because that was the last one. In this case, we're selecting it and boom, now we've got the straightaway right off that point. But the tangents could still be a little messed up. You could still have a little variation. So we have some additional right click options that are really helpful. So you can right click this, and then in snap and align, you can tell it to
straight into next point. Straight in the next point.
You can do straight into next point or straight into previous. Straight into next is very useful now that they're all aligned on the same Z. Now they all just flatten out and it's a perfect straightaway. You can also do that to fix turns, or if twists are happening that you don't want, you can just realign it so that it's pointing to the next one and it straightens it out. Really helpful trick. So from there, one of the biggest asks we get all the time, we're seeing in community, is I'd love to make a loop-de-loop. How do I make a loop-de-loop? So
you're not putting a loop-de-loop in your track. I mean,
yeah, we all played with Hot Wheels growing up. You need to build a loop-de-loop.
Yep.
And initially, without setting a few settings, it can cause a lot of rotations to be weird. It's a inherent problem with gimbal lock, if you've ever heard of it. Or
like if you just make a spline point like this going up,
you can see it's rotating in some weird ways, and that's not what you want when making your loop-loop. So Donnie's going to instead, before dragging up, going to set this set stable roll variable. Essentially what that's doing is each point within the selection as you make it is going to try to maintain that same up vector so that it essentially follows it nicely and keeps that rotation. There's not a lot of twisting going on. Donnie can now pull it up and change it and mess with it and start making this loop. Some interesting points. If Donnie makes a third point, so again, this is copying the standard, the stable roll. And now that all three of these points still have it toggled on, if Donnie goes and chooses the first point that we made. Oh.
That was just tangent stuff.
Yep. If Donnie goes and chooses that first point and starts rolling that first point, do the one at the bottom for us.
Oh, yep.
And starts messing with the roll, because all three of these still have stable roll on. I don't know if that's quite roll. I think you're doing
a twist.
It's the red one. Yeah. So you can see now all of them are rotating together. So now you can make these side turns and things like that. It keeps it together. If you didn't have stable roll on while doing that, you would just be twisting that one point Donnie is touching. And so this can create some interesting stuff like that. But Donnie's going to rotate it back, and we're going to continue making this loop. One of the easiest ways we have found to do this is just essentially either use 4 or 6 points where you start with one at the bottom, come up, and then essentially you're setting up the points that then you're going to mess with the tangents to make it that nice round shape that you want.
UEFN lagged for me. 1 second, and there we go. That's a lot smoother.
That did look pretty cool though.
Yeah, this is still going to be wacky enough that
it does take a second to still finagle with the tangents and everything to get that perfect circle you want, but it is definitely a lot easier using stable roll than trying to go figure out those rotations yourself that happened in the weirdness of going directly up.
This is already looking like one of the best loops I've seen.
Well,
We've got some fun little twisting going on there, but that could be fun.
yep. I'll probably just twist that back, but yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great example of us creating that loop. Now, we've now highlighted a bunch of like really cool of these right-click menus that kind of help you in your track, and we've started making something, but this isn't a full track, right? Like we've just started messing with the track itself. So what we're gonna do from here is we're gonna take this secondary split we've made and this loop-to-loop and connect them into a full loop of a track. So what Donnie's gonna do here is just continue the track out, finishing that loop, and then it's gonna start to turn slightly back to that center of the track. Now we're creating that lap. You don't necessarily have to create a loop track. You can easily make a non-loop track with teleport checkpoints that bring you back, and we'll go over what a teleport checkpoint is and how you set that up here shortly. And I think you went into the water there at the bottom.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. It's an aquatic track. Well,
well, the water will kill you because of it will demolish you, and it has fancy stuff.
That's a jumping section.
Terrain water. Yeah.
Cars and water don't mix 100%.
Yeah.
So
no,
that's
it's an intentional jumping section.
Puddle jumper 3.
Yeah. I did it on purpose.
So now that the track's out here, Donnie wants to connect it. There are 2 ways we can do that. There was the original one I briefly mentioned in the style editor widget on the device tab. There's the set as looping track. Or Donnie can just right click the track itself. Not the node, actually, in this case.
Oh, no, you still can.
Oh, it's still here.
Yeah, it's there.
Node or track. Okay, both options are there.
Close.
And you can
close loop.
set it. Yep, close loop. And now suddenly it will connect those 2. And in this case, Donnie pulled it out quite nicely that it almost was perfect, but you can see this connection point at the base
still need
was
to
just
be
a little tight.
Yep.
And as Donnie adjusts that might mess up the player start, so that's something to be aware of. Did they get lowered? But they actually look relatively good. I think one of them got moved.
I'm just gonna raise them in case, because you have to be careful, else you might spawn under the track, just because that's how that works.
So as you can see, we now have a kind of wacky track. But what Donnie hasn't done, and we're gonna create here, is what if we don't want this secondary path to just end in the middle of nowhere. We want this to actually connect. So we can utilize those right-click menus again to do something fun. Donnie can just bring over the end of this track to wherever they would like to connect it to the main track. And we're going to utilize that right-click menu we showed you again to connect back into the track super easily.
Just curve it. Probably should raise my camera. Not my camera speed. Also, I do not have great depth perception, so sometimes I drag the track a little far. All right. Yep. There we go.
So we want to connect here. There might not be a spline point right where Donnie wants to connect, but Donnie can easily right-click like we did before and just add a spline point. The one thing it can do is something like this. If adding a spline point does that, you just have to readjust slightly, or readjust tangents is usually another way to do it. But now Donnie can maybe just lift that point just a little bit so we don't run straight into the water.
Yeah.
But now Donnie's going to do the same right-clicking and that same snap align, and it should make a really nice...
I guess it is aligned. Oh, I'm selected on the...
You have the wrong one selected. Yep, that's all it was.
Yep. That's why I wasn't doing anything. There was no nearest spline point. Bam.
Boom. Now we got a beautiful connection again. We just might have to adjust that. We're not going to adjust it for the sake of time, but now
Now this track's perfect.
our track is set up. It's perfect. It's ready. Ship it. But so the last part is, we actually have to make the player be able to drive this. How do we want the player to flow this? If you just have, technically all you need to pass validation is a start and end checkpoint. They don't have, they could even be the same checkpoint if it's a looping track like this. But you want to kind of guide the player with checkpoints to restrict them on corners or open up corners to as much freedom as movement or as restricted freedom of movement as you want. The best way to do that is with some checkpoints. So Donnie's just going to place a few to show that example, and we're also going to talk about how to handle this split path with checkpoints. So checkpoints, essentially, just the start and finish line checkpoint have to go through a track. It is required so that the primary track, it must go through the start and finish line, just because you, as I said, that's one, to help guard against positioning, and also just so that you can fully complete the track. But so Donnie's making this checkpoint right at the split, right? And now we have two choices for the player to go. So in order to create those choices, we create two different paths of checkpoints and link them together. So Donnie's going to create a second checkpoint, currently just quickly fixing up that center. But what Donnie did here, and what you can just see, is Donnie selected the checkpoint, and there's a next checkpoints array in it. That next checkpoint is telling you where the next checkpoint is. The best way to do is just click the little dropper tool, which Donnie did, but we'll see it again when we do it here. That little dropper tool just allows you to select the next checkpoint. So what we're going to do is on the split checkpoint, it's going to point at both paths next checkpoints. That means once you go through that split path checkpoint, both of the next checkpoints are going to activate and be an option. Once then the player goes for those both active checkpoints, whichever one they go into, they're going to then follow that checkpoint path all the way to the point where it needs to reconnect. Again, the path for all checkpoints from start all the way around must end back at finish. So at this split path, when we put one on the secondary track, that secondary track one must eventually, if you step down its checkpoint line, eventually be able to get back to that finish line, because you're going to follow those paths. So one thing we... Oh, go ahead.
I'm curious, actually, as Donnie's dropping these checkpoints on the map, is there similar to how you snap and align tracks together on spline points? Is there a way you can snap or align these checkpoints to the track in terms of spacing, so you're not leaving too little room between the checkpoint wall?
I can take this one too. Unfortunately, no, not right at this point, but this is on the roadmap. I do want to add more ways to snap other actors to your spline.
Gotcha.
Because you will see that as Donnie moves his spline around every now and then, it kind of leaves behind all the things that he had perfectly lined up. So this is on the roadmap, I think, hopefully for, I don't know, some months away.
But definitely something we want to look into, because as you said, Devin, it would be very helpful to snap that directly. So one thing I just wanted to mention is, if we look at this corner Donnie has on the primary spline right now, right? Donnie has a checkpoint where they just clicked, and then the next checkpoint is all the way back at the split path. Or, well, there's one up the loop. Sorry, I missed that one. But once, essentially right now, with the way the track is designed, once the player gets to that loop and passes that checkpoint, they could jump off and fly all the way across.
Yep.
You could want them to do that. You could make something fun like that. But if you don't, all you have to do is place some more checkpoints to force them to continue going along the track path. And then you can cut off as many shortcuts on corners as you want by putting lots of checkpoints. You can make as many fun actual large gap shortcuts where you can make fun cuts and things like that by using less checkpoints.
Just easily place another. And I'm just using the basic UEFN shortcut of Alt drag to just copy all these. I find it a lot quicker than having to go back into the device. But remember, when you do that, just to do what I'm doing and just quickly fix this. If you don't, you will get validation errors if they don't all link to each other.
Yep. And so, just speaking about a little bit of respawning and checkpoints, I know there's some questions around whether or not you respawn directly back at checkpoints or how that works. The track itself is calculating your last valid track position, and therefore you're going to respawn back on track where you last were when you blow up. Even if you've if you jumped off track and have traveled further on the distance of the spline and then blown up, you will respawn the distance that you have gone. And so you don't respawn directly back at checkpoints unless you have passed a checkpoint that doesn't have a valid track position. Quinn might be able to correct me if I'm wrong there.
What was that? Sorry.
That you'll respawn back at a checkpoint if there wasn't a last valid track position, but you hit a checkpoint without it.
Yes. If you want to know the details, the respawn system will pretty much always put you at your furthest forward position. But if you miss a checkpoint, it will not place you beyond that checkpoint because you do need to collect it.
Yep. And so the last final thing I just wanted to mention with checkpoints is we did make a looping track here. So Donnie just had them all loop straight to this start and finish line, which as you can see, they set as both a start and finish line. But let's say we didn't want to do that just for the sake of it. You could make the last checkpoint what you want, a teleport checkpoint, and make that the finish line, and then point its next checkpoint back to the beginning one. Now that checkpoint in its next checkpoint list is a teleport checkpoint. If you have more than one checkpoint in the next checkpoint list as a teleporter, it will randomly choose one of them. You don't get to prioritize them as of now, but you can still have split pass on a teleport where it's just completely random where you end up, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
And so teleport's usually used for a multi-lap non-looping track, but you can use it in unique ways to skip around your map or create unique tracks that have different like almost biomes that you're teleporting between, all sorts of fun stuff.
Which we will be showing off later. There's one of the track we want to show that uses that very interestingly, where it is a looping track, but it makes you think it's not a looping track using teleports.
And so that's kind of the general gist of the existing tools on just everything you need to make a track. From there, we've got a few other devices to spice up your track a little bit. We've got the speed pads, the typical green speed pads you've seen in our other tracks give you boosts. And I believe we have one or two
EMP
options on them. What are the options there?
Oh, there are no options on the speed pad.
Oh, not right now. Yep. Okay.
Oh,
yep,
wait.
So
the speed ID group, but that's
yes.
it.
So this is what I wanted to touch on. You can set a speed ID group. That essentially, if you have a set of checkpoints that you don't want to multi-trigger, where you just want a group of them where they all, if you trigger one of them, you just get the trigger and you don't want it to multi-trigger, you can set a group ID on those to essentially be a group of speed pads that activate together, and things like that. So we've got that. Then we've got the EMP hazard, which is our lovely little EMP hazards that you probably all love running into while racing. I know I do. So here we can change the shape between a cube and a sphere, and you can then modify and shape them, put them wherever you want, deform them.
Yep.
And essentially create those hazards that you'd like to avoid. The final tool here that we're going to just briefly go over before going over a little bit more of an advanced one is an elimination volume. And an elimination volume is your third and final way of eliminating a player in unique ways. So if you, let's say the Z kill floor is really low because you have a really tall track that goes in a lot of places, but when you're at the top section, you want a Z kill floor that kills them up there. Well, you can bring an elimination volume and place it out. This is only visible in UEFN. Or additionally, another use case I've seen level designers use is if they have like a little shortcut through a wall, but that wall can sometimes bounce you in weird ways. If you just hit it, they put an elimination volume on that wall, so it's guaranteed to demo you if you miss the shortcut and you don't get bounced in ways that the player gets mad about. So it can be utilized in a few different ways and is a cool additional tool.
All right. Do we want to jump into the last device, which we have a little bit of a showcase for?
We could jump into that unless there are a few top end questions we could quickly answer on this. I don't know if we have any from the moderators currently.
Yeah, we've actually been pulling in. There's quite a few questions for y'all, but I wanted to make sure that you kept your flow when you were going through your demo there.
This is a good point to
yeah, we can answer a few questions on what we went over before we go over on this next advanced tooling device.
Sure. So one of the first questions around hazards actually is, will there be moving hazards or objects such as that added to UEFN?
Cannot actually disclose that at this time.
Yeah, we can't say a yes or a no for that. I think we can say it is definitely something that has been discussed. It's not something that we are unaware of. It is something that we know is wanted. It's just we can't give a definitive answer at this point.
Absolutely understandable.
I will say the EMP that we have on the track here in its current form, I love EMPs. I know a lot of players run into those on tracks and can mess up their lap times. I love them for a very special reason because throughout making Rocket Racing, that's one of the few things that appearance-wise hasn't really changed a ton.
No.
Since like the early days of us working on this game, it was always just like, yeah, it should be this really cool, interesting looking kind of orange blob that you can manipulate and put on the track. And that's it's an interesting through line with the development of this game over the years.
Yep.
Its actual VFX changed, but other than that, it was still an
the
orange
VFX changed. Yeah. It was always an orange blob.
I mean, nothing says hazard quite like an orange blob, right? All right, next question for y'all. Thoughts on the viability of making custom obstacles that slow the racer down on contact, incorporating physics and custom meshes or props?
That is definitely something we are investigating. The thought of opening up additional ideas in that, but we do not have any definitive things that are coming out that are like that we can talk about. But it's again, it's something we definitely are thinking about and looking into.
All right, let's see. Want to make sure, because there's quite a few, and I'm probably just going to throw a lot of these at y'all at the end here. Make sure you have time to get through other demos. But last question I think I'll toss your way for now is, are there plans for, or are there currently ways that the mesh can be unified or transitioned on Y track splits? The same type transitions between track types would be great for joints.
So
I can take that.
Yeah.
It is on the roadmap, but obviously not currently. There's no like true Y split. So what you guys have done here is the closest you'll get. But yes, there will be sometime in the future more ways to make a cooler Y split that's a bit more seamless.
Very cool. All right.
We have seen some contractors and stuff utilize this existing stuff with other set dressing to create some Y splits that are unique, or utilizing non-track pieces as well to create interesting Y splits within terrain that kind of sands it in all sorts of fun ways, but not an existing tooling for it yet.
Yeah.
Awesome. So lots of exciting things to keep an eye out for. But yeah, the rest of the questions for now We'll keep collecting them. If you have questions, make sure you still post them in chat. We're grabbing all of them, I promise you. But I'll toss it back to y'all if you sounded like you had something else up your sleeve.
Advanced tool
Yeah.
time, right?
Yep.
One more advanced tooling. So we decided to make a specific track, and I'm gonna let Donnie speak a little bit on this since this was Donnie's.
Yep. I threw together a track to show off the active track volume, which is a device that we believe that we haven't seen a lot of use of, because it's kind of an advanced it's an advanced device. It's hard to figure out right away, like, what is the point of the active track volume. So I put together a little sample track. It's not polished. I didn't do set dressing, full set dressing. Like, I don't know why this lake is a perfect square, but I threw together a track to show one of the ways you can use it is use the active track volume to have a map with that works and functions with absolutely no track. As you can see, there is no track material. If I go to the details panel, however, there is still a track spline. As we were going over the different styles and road shapes, one of the options which Galen, let me get that in the right box. Don't you love snapping? That Galen mentioned, but we didn't go into detail, is one of the road shapes and road style you can set for all of them is none. And when you do this, you could do this with like secondary, like Galen was saying, if you have a like an air dodge section and you want to jump. Thing is, if you do this and there is no track material, for a lot of the logic, the respawn logic, the position logic is based on your wheels landing on the track. If there's no track to land on to set that, hey, which track should be my active track where all the position logic is tracking, you use the active track volume. Right here, where we've seen the details, the active track volume has really only one setting, yet it is still an advanced tool, and you just set the track. You use the dropper and you select a track. This is also why, if you're doing what I'm doing here, sorry, I did not organize my project well enough. I need to use more folders. But this is why Galen and I brought up lengthening or thickening your track spline and your nodes, because that will make it easier to click. Using the active track volume, you set this as an active track. And so I put it right here. So
And
when the
again,
race starts,
you don't need to use this active track volume when using track pieces. If you're making
Yes.
secondary tracks to make air dodge sections with track pieces, you don't need to use it.
yes.
But if you are making an air dodge section that is just with like off-road rocks and buildings or
Mhm.
something cool like that, no respawning will happen on that without an active track volume, because it won't recognize that you've moved to a secondary track.
Mm-hmm. And so for this, have it set up, they should cross, and then all the logic, the tracking should function and will function based on this, even if there is no actual track here. In fact, it will even still all the off-track radius and all those messages that'll pop up being like return to track will still pop up even though you don't see a track. So let's say you're driving here, drove here, and we're like, hey, I don't want to do this jumping section, even though there is a checkpoint there, and they jump off. They will still, even though there is no visible track, if they go here, they will start getting the return to track message, because this is set as your active track. Additionally, there's one more little option for spline points that we didn't really go over because it's completely tied to this, is over here, right above the use stable role in the section, is force hidden track respawns. Now you have to set this per node, and that basically means with a hidden track, this will force in this for this spline node that you will have respawns. The reason you have to set it per node is, like, this spline point is a very good example. You don't want to respawn here. So you don't want your player to pass here, and then be forced to respawn because you would fall in the water and die, and that would be, you know, an endless death loop. So we, using force hidden track respawn, instead be like, nope, I would rather us respawn here. And then that should, if let's say I around this section jump, fly over there and get reset, that should set me here, or depending on the distance, closer to here. And then Galen was talking about like, let's say you have a secondary track section, but it's with a wall, so we kind of set up over here. I haven't moved it
you
yet.
could just leave this wall as is and someone could use it. But if you
Yeah.
want this wall to be considered for positional tracking as a shortcut, to have respawn logic on it, a great example, if you all know the live map Olympus, there are walls on the side that are rocks that you drive along, and those are secondary tracks with an active track volume on them. That way, when you die in that section, you respawn right back on those walls and are able to keep going. So that way, that large gap, you're not always respawning at the beginning or the end of it. So Donnie here was able to just put a secondary track directly along this. And essentially right now, without the active track volume, again, you can see a nice example here of those connection points on how it's doing position tracking, like we were talking about before. But Donnie can now have this track here. Now it's considered a secondary track, and they can put a secondary track volume over the whole rock, essentially, so that if you go on either side of the rock, it knows there's a track spline there and will respawn you at that position.
Yep. I also want to give a bit of clarification on what I said about the force respawn. So the respawn will, you use the force hidden track respawn will basically, any section of the spline after this point will basically be set to respawn. So if I actually do leave it here, it would actually could respawn me in the water here. So we would turn that off and make sure it's set for here going forward. Just to clarify, it isn't set for each node. It's set for a node and then the section and length of spline after that. So that's another thing that if you do something like this, you would have to play with and maybe do a lot of testing to make sure, okay, do I have the correct node set for force hidden track respawn, so I don't give anyone a unfortunate respawn.
And we recommend, when truly trying to test out all of this respawn logic, to be in a private island code with the full. One thing we didn't mention, but when launching a session, you are essentially launching a edit session in UEFN, and it has just UEFN UI and all sorts of things, and it's running and allowing you to play the track and get a feel for it. But if you want to get a feel for how the player's going to experience and that end result, you do want to publish the track privately and test that. You can even test that private publish through the launch session window, and we will actually show that when we run this.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to, correct me if I'm wrong, Quinn, but in this secondary spline that's on this sidewall, if you don't set those force track respawns on it at all, it will just utilize the last place you were validly touching the ground within the track radius, correct? Or is it required to set those?
You're going to be required to set it on that kickflip wall. If you do not, you're basically not registering a respawn location on that track, and your respawn location is going to still be back on the primary of where you left.
Clear. So you want to opt in. And so this could be an example of, you might want positional tracking on the wall, but not respawn tracking where you wouldn't set that. Or you do want it to be a respawn and positionally tracked thing. Again, if you don't, you could just leave that wall there with no track, but then you're not going to get that nice additional positional tracking that's clean and creating it as a shortcut itself. And so I believe Donnie's gonna show us the end result of this.
So we're gonna just upload the private version. As long as I haven't done anything wrong, should not have any validation errors.
Moment of truth.
Yep, because we did do that secondary track live, so let's hope.
I have faith.
Yeah, and while this loads, I can even talk about that. Like that secondary. Oh, there's your code. That was fast. If you didn't want respawn logic there, I would just not put a track at all and just let the primary do its thing. It's you don't need position tracking on such a short track in a way. Is all I'm trying to get at.
Little like air drift sections, air dodge sections.
It can be nice, but you might get little weird position tracking errors up in that position tracker for the actual race, just because people are kind of moving around on these very small tracks. So they could just momentarily drop down to second, even though they were kind of in first because they were just ahead of someone, but they moved to a different track.
Right. We're having launch, and we're going to show, and some of you might already know this. I know this is a trick that many of our creators already use, where you can still access your private codes through this editor window if you don't want to just test it in the editor. And as Galen said, our race managers that handle the logic, they basically they put a lot of our game logic and inject it during the whole process where we generate the code, which is again why you can play in the editor, but some of the logic of our game mode experience might not be there. So for the most accurate test of our physics and everything, testing it using a private island code gets the best results.
Yes, essentially what we're getting at there is you utilize the launch session for quick iteration and testing, but for final testing before actually publishing it, you should definitely come in and try at least one private island publish first, just to make sure all your respawn logic.
But we'll see how well it plays. Again, some adjustments might need to be made. It's not going to be perfect. I did not create a perfect track, but it's a good sample to show, like, okay, still working. What do you need to then go and adjust? What goes? Maybe you realize you scaled things up way too big because you weren't sure of the scale, as I did. I am getting friend. Might have had to hide my name. I'm getting friend requests. But you see, we're not. We still have. Well, it's hard to show tracking when I'm just one person, but it's not yelling at me that I'm not on a track, so that's already a good sign. Yes, it shows that I need to do some adjustment because I'm getting a lot of LOD popping. As you see, my pyramid's not there, but still going fine. The checkpoints are working, but let's see what happens if I... So that shows that I need to set, because I didn't set force track respawn on probably all the correct nodes. And so it's sending me further back. And so that's a great example of when you're doing something like this, go through, do a lot of testing on, okay, where did I set force track respawn? Where will it respawn me? Make sure you're setting the LOD settings well. At least I can still see the checkpoint. Oof, and I might have made the jump too far for me to make it. Oh, I almost recovered that.
But there you also saw that return to track, and if you didn't want that radius to be 1,000 at that point, you could change it and make it shorter, larger, things like that, because I know that was a question as well.
Yes.
But yeah,
it's
essentially,
interesting
I know
that my water isn't appearing. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. And I know we did this with a primary track to show the idea of a fully trackless complete track, but you can also...
Problem is, but I think I don't need to go through the whole thing. The issue there, again, this is a good sign of debugging, because if we just go here, the issue is I literally, because I land here, I don't know where my track is. And that's the danger sometimes of doing this. And again, if I had better set dressing, you could do like what I did here and here, where you can set up funnels that make it clear, where here it's wide open. And so that's not a really good choice. So I either could, as Galen was saying, go here and make the off-track radius instead of 10,000, 500,000. Or that might be more zeros. That might be 5 million. I couldn't count the zeros. And make it so, okay, you will never get that message there. Or probably a better fix is just put better set dressing and better guiding to tell the player where to go.
And a typical major use of this entire setting is to create those secondary shortcuts that Devin talked about everyone loving. Like, I know we have some in a lot of those live maps where you take off-road sections when the road goes up there and you're now suddenly on dirt. A lot of times those are secondary splines that are a shortcut that have an active track volume for you to enter them, since they don't actually have a track. And yeah, so that this is just another tool in your toolbox to make more advanced tracks, and we hope that this was informative on how to actually utilize that and create something.
This is the start of a great map, and also when you're on the ground level in your car, you can't quite tell it's a square lake, so I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Yeah.
Looks like a pretty normal lake
again, this is not getting published, but if you want to make something similar like this, I know I've seen already in community, we've had some contractors who have made winter and ice maps, so it's just a way. But again, you could do this with any terrain.
And I think we wanted to talk a little bit next about vehicle spawner.
Yeah, so this is the conclusion on all of the tools and stuff that's available in the Rocket Racing template. And so that's what you will do if you are going to create your own tracks that get published and can be found in that track and experience, and basically get you up there and actually race our game mode. Now we also released the vehicle spawner device, which is a device open to regular creative, so not using one of our templates. And we have an example project here that we made for you all. And the vehicle spawner device is Fortnite's most customizable vehicle spawner in the ecosystem. So there are more tunable knobs on it by far than most other vehicle spawners. And this allows you to get a lot of direct control on making unique experiences with these fun freedom of movement mechanics.
Yeah,
now,
just showing over on the right the amount of options. These are all, this list that I like is so long. Those are all the tunable knobs for our vehicle. And
we are definitely going to go over some of them, but possibly not all of them.
Oh, definitely not all of them.
Definitely not all of them.
Look how many.
The documentation does have some good explanation of what each of them do, as well as if you hover over them, they have a general comment that explains what that tunable knob is doing. So if you just dropped one in, you'd have the exact same Rocket Racing car that you all know and love, and it would just be in your experience the way it is. But then with creative experiences, that can oftentimes be too fast because our cars are really, really fast. So there are options to like reduce that speed if you want it to play more like a BR car, but have that fun freedom of movement with the kick flips and the underthrusts and things like that. But we decided, for the sake of this demo, to show you some more drastic whole changes to the entire vehicle to create different experiences besides a racing experience. So we're going to start by showing you the submarine.
Okay. Do we want to show it in engine first or play first?
Let's play it first, and then we'll show how we accomplish that.
Okay. So play first. Launch session.
So we've got two different examples here for you. We're going to go over one, which the first one is our submarine idea where we essentially turned off some aerial gravity and so that there's less aerial gravity, more movement, a little less underthrust, to the point where you almost feel like you're flying underwater. You can actually do this in air and essentially make more of a plane, but we thought it'd be fun to try to create it more like a submarine, that it actually still has a little drop to it and you're kind of maintaining that in water. And in this case, you could make a fun little race or obstacle course, or even use it in some sort of underwater combat or something fun like that, where you could actually be in it and be
I'm gonna
surviving.
start game, and I set it up so we have spawn, and then we have our two little examples. So rocket submarine, which I put together. Galen did the other one, which we'll talk about. So I set up this little, and it's just a showcase more. It's a quote unquote tech demo, because it's more of a drive float underwater than a game. But so that's already showing what Galen was talking about, like the gravity, and you go slow. And so I tuned some knobs of not just the speed, but also, as you can see, thrust is you have a lot of thrust. It regains over time, not when you touch the ground, because you're not going to touch the ground. And you can basically just, you have a lot of it, like a huge amount. You don't drain the amount, forget the exact name of the option, but it's basically like the thrust amount per click. And then as you see, we do a little drop, but the gravity is such that you don't ever have to fall, and you can just have a nice little submarine adventure. I also adjusted, it's a little silly, the turbo. Turbo will now last 30 seconds, but it does not really make you go that fast. I did it just so your submarine can have a little bit of a, like afterburners. But in fact, I think you go slower with the turbo, so that's something I could tune.
And that all just comes from us tuning the different knobs, and you could then create fast boats in this water. You could do a lot of things. You could put hidden planes to stop you from being able to go above the water, whatever you wanted to actually create this kind of underwater experience. You can also take it to the sky if you wanted to make more of a flying one, and you could make it faster and have tighter turns or whatever you'd like. But let's just quickly go over kind of some of the options we did to create this. Woo.
Let me bring us back to editor. There goes my submarine plane car, whatever I did. And I can end game here as well. So go back, and here, as I said, I tuned, I turned the base top speed all the way down to 0.3, which is currently, as you see, I can't go any lower. That is the lowest cap. But I also turned base acceleration and base deceleration down to 0.1, also the lowest. That way, so when you're under the water, I found that if you were going too fast in the water, it didn't feel like a sub. You were like zooming under the water and wasn't as fun for what I was going. I also turned oversteer off. You can have it enabled, but it's disabled because every time I turned, my submarine was going into a drift, and I wasn't making battleships, so I didn't need to have a drifting submarine. Let's see, and before anyone comments, yes, yes, I know it's a battleship. It's called Battleship. Still. But down here, the other one's gravity aerial scaler. Now that is what I tuned, so I could have that gravity. I tuned it. It's now at 0.035. This is the one that I spent the most time playing with. If you set it straight to 0, it does what you want. You float, but you float forever. So I would do my thrust, I would go, and then I would just keep going like a very slow balloon into the sky. So I had to have a little bit of gravity and to kind of have that balance, but not enough that you would go down right away. Along with that, I changed, here's what I was talking about, thrust meter replenish delay, so just 1 second, but the rate I set to 0.1. And so your thrust meter replenished a little slowly, and then Wait, and the expenditure I think is over here. Thrust meter consumption rate. That's what I was talking about earlier. 0.1 as well. So you do not use a lot of it. And then finally, the thruster force, along with like I said, the jump force. Jump force is how much force when you jump. Thruster force is how much force when you use your thrusters, along with thruster max upward speed. And this is the one I had to tune a lot along with the gravity aerial scaler, because if you had even like a 0.5, which would be half, it starts at 1, that's enough with this low gravity, it would rocket you straight in the air. And so there are all ways to like those knobs that I tune to get just the right amount that I'm just keeping up in the water, but not going fully skyward unless I held down the button, as you saw in the end.
And even as Donnie was explaining that there, you can hear that there are a lot of fun things Donnie accidentally did while doing this, and there are plenty of opportunities within even the designing of this to come up with something drastically different in the sky or in the water. You could have water drifting and all sorts of crazy stuff if you wanted to.
Oh, I also tuned base maximum aerial speed, which is just the max speed you can achieve in the air. So that's another important one, because if you're doing one like this where I want to stay airborne, if that's up too high, you could still be going too fast, even though your jump force and everything else is set low. That would still cause quite a lot of problems.
Or you could do something the opposite, where you make your aerial speed the only thing that's fast, and you can't be fast on the ground, and suddenly now you have a full aerial challenge. Things like that. Which, speaking of aerial challenges,
right,
we have mine, which is a full aerial challenge. This one didn't go too deep into some of the advanced settings, but just wanted to show kind of some uniqueness on what you could do in the air. So here, essentially what I did was I increased the number of air dodges that you have to 2, and I put a little delay between them so you can't spam 2 right away, and essentially created it so that our sticky wheels are off. We still rotate the surfaces, but anything above about a 60 degree, or I think it's 75 degree angle, you'll slide off of. So you can't drive on walls, you can't drive on the ceiling. But what I did leave on is aerial rotation, where it actually tries to latch you to those surfaces. So even though you can't stay on them, you can latch to them, which made me create an aerial obstacle course where the whole point is just to try to get from surface to surface, but you can't stay on it. And it's all about just re-getting your kickflip, your air dodges, and your thrust so that you can keep going.
Yep, and I'm going to do it now. And so I will say, before I probably fail this, I have completed it once before, but as we saw with my own track, I might just be showing how bad I am at my own game. But as you see, I did not stick there. Yeah, I'm falling off automatically.
Yep.
There we go. Yep. And
so we did put a kill volume.
Yep.
Yeah, an elim volume, so that basically when you die, if you made this yourself, you could add all sorts of fun things like giving yourself points per surface you get on, or maybe the less surfaces you get on, the more points you get, or something like that. But in this one, it's fun because it's actually you get your under thrust, but you have 2. Oh no!
Oh, that was unique. I totally missed the arch, so I missed my reset. Yeah.
Can try one more time. So funny enough,
one more time. I knew I would fail it. That's why I gave the preamble.
This is the easier of 2 ones I've made. We're gonna show
that.
You.
Don't tell them.
I said easier, not that it was easy.
Oh, why'd I air dodge down? Okay.
Are you on keyboard?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I'm on keyboard. I do not. That's my excuse. I'm on mouse and keyboard. I did not plug in a controller.
There you go.
But essentially, the harder version of this that I created was one where you have 1 under thrust tank. So we can actually go look at this.
Yep.
What I did instead was, so in this one, I've reduced the consumption rate. So if we look at this, the consumption rate is actually consuming at 1.8. So you have less under thrust than thrusters than you normally would. And so you basically only have a little bit to get between each of those, but you have a double kickflip. Now, the harder version of this is I then removed gain thrust on landing. So if Donnie went down to gain thrust on landing and turned it off, and then also brought that consumption rate back down to 1, essentially now what this creates is you have 1 tank of thrust to do the entirety of the obstacle course, but you have to utilize those double kickflips. You have to do up kickflips to get air and then dodge and then dodge. I wish I was on controller and could hop in here. I would have shown you,
set
but
air dodge count is 2. So
It is
I
2.
didn't realize that. I could have dodged again. So that was also
Yes, so
me
you
just
have
not realizing. I still
2
would have
air
failed.
dodges, and so the harder one where you did it, or where you do it, is you have to choose very sporadically when you use that thrust, because you don't have very much of it and you have to utilize air dodges. You could take that air dodges to 5 and make really open ones or whatever you'd like, but that's just another example of a way you can rework the device spawner to make a completely different game mode. And as I said, you could then, I didn't have the time to do this, but if you wanted to make this a full game mode, a thought I had is you could put trigger devices on each of the surfaces, and each one like removes score. Maybe you have an inherent score, and then the less surfaces you touch, the better your score at the end. Something fun like that. You could utilize all of that within just messing with this vehicle spawner.
Yeah, there's a bunch. We played around, but didn't get to the aerial where you float forever, and playing around using the grapple gauntlet, and the grapple gauntlet hooking to that like a balloon, and maybe make something where it's a 2-player where one person has to navigate the balloon, the other person has to swing and not die with the grapple gauntlet. There's a lot you can do with it.
In the meantime, though, I'm definitely going to need your best times for this so I can try it myself. And get the best time.
Yeah, we'll make it the new speedrun thing, but we'll have to do it quick before Trevor then runs it, else we will never be able to beat him.
Who is
the engineer
physics
for
engineer.
this? Physics engineer for this is notoriously the best at
Unable
rocket
to be
racing.
beaten.
Yeah, of the devs. All right, and then I think now we're on to just kind of went over these tools. Like we said, we can't go over all of these options. There are so many to play with, but
I do want to
just
highlight the 2 main ones I did here. If you could go down to the latch, aerial gravity. Forgetting the 2 of them. They're right here. I can't read on the stream very well.
Is it in the advanced?
Yeah, it's in the advanced. I'm just struggling to read it.
Oh, surface latch degree threshold and surface counter gravity degree. Yes.
So surface latch degree threshold I still have at like 75 or something like
180.
that.
You have the degree threshold at 180.
So the latch
75 is the counter.
threshold I have at 180, which was what allows you to actually latch to it when you attach to it. Because even if Donnie didn't kickflip up to that surface, if they had thrust up to it, they would have latched to it. So it keeps that latch threshold. But what we turned on is the other one. Can you read the name for me?
Oh, the surface counter gravity.
The surface counter gravity, which that is actually the sticky wheels that are countering gravity and keeping you on that surface. So reducing that to 75 is what's making that so that on those 75 surfaces you're falling off and things like that. But there's a lot to play here with, and we didn't even mess with every setting. So there are some more, and I'm excited to see after this video to see. I'd really like for the community to go make something really crazy with these spawners and do something that we haven't even thought of yet, because I know there's so many more opportunities with this device.
Yeah, absolutely. I love obstacle courses like this too. Just seeing what players can come up with. Unless you had some other tools in here that you wanted to talk about, I think we can kick it over to talking about some of these awesome what's possible in rocket racing tracks that were made during a game jam at our office not too long ago.
Yeah.
Actually,
or do we want to take some questions first?
Yeah, would y'all be up for doing some rapid fire answers for some questions?
Yeah.
Awesome. And then we'll hop right into that. I figure we'll just
the questions make sense.
We'll kind of rapid fire it. Yeah, we'll rapid fire it. If you can't answer them, That's fine. I could say that's a great question. All right, so these are going to be in no particular order. So whoever feels like grabbing it, just go for it. We'll kind of play it by ear and see how it goes. First up here, has there been any consideration to making car hitboxes different and making those different hitboxes make the car drive differently?
We
I'm
want all the
unsure.
hitboxes to be the same because it's a competitive racer, in the sense of
Yes.
we don't want the idea of your car gives you an advantage or disadvantage or things like that. So even with the new added SUV body types and things like that, it's still going to be the same general hitbox that's happening.
I
And
think
this
I
is
think the hitbox on the SUV is a little bit taller, but
it's a little bit bigger,
it's
yeah.
definitely something that our design team is being thoughtful about, and
Yeah, don't want
you know,
anything where people discover, oh, this is the best vehicle, or any anger of like, oh, you have to buy the best vehicle to win. And we don't want any of that.
Yeah, definitely. Next question here for you. Is it possible to add multiple starting points?
How
Huh.
so? Like,
Like it, I'm guessing means so the start line, you can have multiple start lines. At the moment, no. There is a singular start line. Now in speedrun, you can have multiple starts, like race positions in speedrun, the priority, and you can start, but in like a competitive, you need one start line and 12 race start positions. And so it is at the moment, no. There are probably some smoke and mirror ways you could maybe mess with that so it seems like a different start position. Like
I've seen one track that used a very large single start line checkpoint, and then they had
Yes.
multiple start positions kind of spread out.
One of the game jam tracks, we're gonna look at an editor because they did something similar. It wasn't same start, but they basically, it was a loop. It was a loop, but you don't know it's a loop. You think it's one single track. And also, like what Quinn said, and got some clarification from one of our designers. Technically, you could set like 6 in a cave, 6 on a beach, or wherever, as long as they all have to cross the same first checkpoint. And again, as Quinn said, you could do that by making a very large checkpoint, and just do is what I like to say about game dev and game design: you smoke and mirrors it. Games are smoke and mirrors. So as long as the player doesn't realize it, that's a success. And as long as it doesn't affect performance or anything. Gotta always be careful when enlarging meshes and doing stuff that your performance is still good.
Awesome. Next question here for you. Is it possible to make an option for our players to see their fastest ghost in game?
I'm wondering if that's asking like your previous fastest ghost, and right now, no, we do not store that data in order, because we'd have to store it for everyone in order for you to be able to query that data and bring it back. We currently don't have that. It is in, there are discussions around that idea on being able to know your best time on tracks and being able to possibly view them or things like that, but currently there's no way to do that.
Oh, and not again, not the current fastest, but their fastest ever. So you always have the ghost of your fastest. Oh wait, no, you answered this. Sorry.
Because we do have current fastest in a run. You know your ghost is your fastest, but yes, to be able to view the all-time fastest is not currently supported.
Is there a way to eliminate a player when they travel a distance from the track that's not in the Z direction?
Yes, so that's that track position one I went over where you
off-track radius.
The off-track radius. So that'll give them a warning when they go off track, not just in that Z. And as I said, Z is just about bot. So if you have is just about that bottom point. So if you have a really tall map, that off-track radius will be based on where you are on the track, where your position
Yeah.
is. So if you're at the top point and you dropped really low, it would do that off-track radius already for you as it happened.
Yeah. So the off-track radius, which you have to set per node, generally, and yeah, if you want to eliminate pretty quickly, you set that to smaller.
Very nice. All right, next up, is there a way to disable the visibility of elimination volume devices?
So elimination volumes are inherently completely invisible once you run. In editor, they are visible, or
Yes.
in, I believe, full launch sessions, they're still invisible as well. But
The
I'm not
base
100%.
might appear, but in the actual like launching into a full rocket racing experience with your private island code or published, they will not appear.
There's no option to even make them visible, so they should be completely invisible.
Yeah.
You should utilize whatever you're putting it around to be clear that that should be what's demoing you. Like an example, water. If you have a little waterfall or something you want to actually demo someone, or whatever you've created, you can put it on that and it should be invisible around it.
Awesome. And I know you touched on this next question a little bit before, but how far can the secondary tracks be from the primary tracks?
Yeah, I did answer this one on I think YouTube chat. For your best performance, you do want the secondary track to start and end pretty close to your primary, because that's how it knows where it's connecting to. But it can go as far away in between those two nodes as you want. It sounds like you're making a long cut at that point.
Additionally, it can connect to another secondary and utilize that secondary to recognize where the primary is. So you could have like multi-tiered secondaries that get you further away from the track, and it will know how to connect back to primary through being connected to the secondaries near it. But in general, like Quinn said, that start and finish should be near a track that you want it to be secondary to. You can have secondaries to secondaries.
Yeah, that is a good point, and something we didn't call out earlier. But yeah, secondaries can connect to other secondaries, so you can get pretty crazy, and you will get validated if it doesn't all make sense.
All right. With the active track volume, is there a way to avoid redundant volumes when having racers travel underground? Listen, speaking is hard, okay?
Redundant volumes
should only need one unless you are changing splines. If you're changing and they're jumping onto another spline that you need tracking and all that logic for, you really only need one. I'm trying to think of a scenario that I'm unaware of that you might need more on that doesn't have to do with secondary splines.
Especially if you were going underground, if there's only one entrance point into a secondary track, you just have to cover that entrance point with the secondary track volume and you're good. But there are times, I know with the level designers, where tracks get close where they will have to make multiple of that same secondary track volume to just create the shape they want to make sure it's just tight enough and not touching another track that might be close. That is a time you have to use more than one.
All right. And then I think the last question I'll toss your way for now. This is kind of an interesting one. Can I export and import splines to use as a track in another map?
Oh, so you like one track, save the spline, and bring it into a new one, so you have that shape and that spline and everything.
I believe so, yeah.
Yes, you can. I say that with a little bit of hesitancy, but I think there might be one or two things that might happen, but I think as long as you just don't try to like drag the map or duplicate a project or something like that, that doesn't play well with the templates. But what you can do is go into your map, select the spline you want, copy it. You could even paste it in the text file if you want. It does just go to text, but you can copy it, go into your new map and paste it. You probably might need to rearrange where it pastes and move it a little bit, and you might want to click rebuild on the track, which is one button we actually didn't go over. When you click the spline itself, in the details panel, there is a rebuild track. If you do that, that'll make sure it rebuilds all the meshes in the new level, and hopefully you'll be good.
Yeah. Also, to be clear, doing this method, it has to be with projects you can open in UEFN. If you're saying like, hey, I want to make a new version of this really cool track someone else made that I found while in Fortnite, you can't do that because you can't download. You have to be on a team with that person or anything, because we don't want to encourage stealing from others. Instead, like, reach out, collaborate, see maybe you can make a team, because that's one of the great ways to use UEFN teams to collaborate and work with someone. But if you own both projects and they're yours and you have them in UEFN, yes, you can copy paste one spline from one project to your other project.
Awesome.
And if you want to, just example, and this is probably bigger in UEFN, if you do end up collaborating with that person and you want to share tracks, when you make a team, then you can literally, like using the project dropdown, you can move your project to a specific team. So then you both can have access to it. That's not just Rocket Racing, that's UEFN overall. But again, that's literally if you are working with this person.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for answering those questions. Devin, I'll hand it back over to you. Give you the reins.
Yeah, I think it's time to talk about some really cool tracks that some creators made for us as part of a game jam we did actually out here in San Diego a few months ago. And it's the tracks, if you go into Fortnite, bring up Rocket Racing, the What's Possible in UEFN track list. Those are all tracks that were made or at least started at the studio between our team and some of the coolest creators out there in the game today.
Yeah, and we can, because like we're credit, we can say the names of the teams who worked on this, right, Devin? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it was 404, 3D Labs, and Lethemir, who's a big Rocket League creator.
Shout out Leth, yeah.
Yeah, and they all came in, and in the course of really a day and a half, but like 2 days, and working along with us, but really we were there as guidance and to point out like, hey, like kind of doing what we did here, to be like, hey, you could do this, oh, you need help with that. Course of a day and a half, they made those tracks, which is even a better example than what we did of like, look how quick you can make a track, and threw this together. All those ones that you played from that part, that's a day and a half work. They did take time to tune stuff before they were published. So, okay, more than a day and a half, but most of those tracks, like the idea of the set
pretty much done.
Pretty much done. They just needed tweaks and polish. But like the core of the tracks, even most of the set dressing was there.
And by the way, there will be some additional Q&A after this. We're just hitting beats of Q&A. We're gonna go in and show these tracks.
Yeah.
Just to.
So I have one up. This is, you might have played it. This is Turbo City, which is like a really awesome track. And honestly, this one was pretty much like all of this was built in a day and a half. There was some polish as well, but so this is actually, you're getting the behind the scenes. This is the project file for Turbo City. This falls into exactly what I was talking about before of working in the team. This is part of our Psionics Labs creator team. And so I have access to this project and just show a few like clever things they did. We were talking about the speed pad and boost pad grouping. Now they did not do the grouping, so these do stack. So it's not, because -1 means it's same. These do stack, so you will get multiple boosts, which was completely, talking with them, part of their design. They wanted you, they called it Turbo City for a reason. And hello, sorry, my cat wants to join the stream.
Surprise guest.
Say hi, Fukuro. He's left. So, and so they went in and, oh, sorry, I'm literally moused out. Thanks, buddy. Because he decided to sit on my mouse. So they went in and they actually, one of the things that I thought was really cool, because I knew you could do it, but I never thought about doing it. They actually went in and they changed and put some components, and they changed part of the mesh here. As you see, it doesn't, the ring is green. It like, yes, ours glow, but they worked on and they actually put in their own meshes. As you see here, they put in like a new material. And that's how they updated. They put in these gas effects that they tried to blend with the speed pads, which is so great. In fact, they do that even more over in probably my. Why is that where the focus went?
The waterfall is one of the coolest things I saw them do.
My favorite part of this track.
Yeah, the whole design behind this, the idea is this factory is creating the speed pads, and this is the actual liquid that goes into them.
Yep.
And so they put hidden speed pads
that they scaled up. And so if you've played this track, you know that when you go over this section, your top speed goes to like 1200 or something. You are zooming through this. I love it. And they have those speed pads, they scaled them up so you will hit them. And they also even told us, like, part of the design is maybe a new player on their first time through will see the green goo and think, well, I don't want to touch green goo. Look at where it's going in a factory. That's bad. And so people might avoid it only to learn later, oh, no, you should hit it. It's really good. And they kind of also build up to that with the, as I showed earlier, the line of speed pads with a little bit of green goo, just to kind of subconsciously teach you, oh yeah, touch the goo. It's good for you.
And I think one of the most creative things about this map that just blew me away when I saw it for the first time was this idea that they brought it into the lore of rocket racing. It's actually a factory, not only creating the speed pads, but as you could see on the left there, that it was creating and had cranes of the EMP hazards moving by, and it's fully set in this world.
Honestly, I never noticed. That is awesome.
It's amazing, and I think they did a fantastic job of, as we've shown just through the checkpoints, to the actual speed pad juice, or I don't know what it is.
Yeah, they also did good of, like, as you see, putting the checkpoints not even directly in the wall, but close enough that you can see them, but through these holes of this like material and mesh they set up and brought in, and did such an incredible job. And so you could still see them. You never kind of get lost when you're driving through. You see things ahead. And I'm also kind of talking to Stull because I'm trying to find, they have a, like, probably one of the best corkscrews we have seen, or at least I've seen right here. Not fully a corkscrew, but an upside down. They sometimes, as you might know with rocket racing, when you're going up and go to upside down, the camera transition can sometimes not feel the smoothest if the upside down is too quick, too short. And they created like the perfect length that it seamlessly transitions, and then you hit those speed pads that, like, it is one of my favorite moments in any track, honestly, is this transition. Just, it nails it, and they nail the speed and the use of the speed pads.
And they use the fancy options that we talked about earlier
to help make this. And secondary track. It is a secondary track.
Yeah, they used a bit of both.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, this really is just a fantastic harmony of a fun, dynamic track and like really thoughtful set dressing. When set dressing can thoughtfully affect how you race, like going back to that speed pad run where you have like the goo going over it and you're not quite sure, that's what makes for a really compelling track in my eyes.
Yeah. And like, to me, this is and they have 404. I love that. It's a great example of like these tools and everything in our template in UEFN makes that you can, like, anyone can make a track on par and at the same way that our internal level designers do. That is the point of it, that all the tools are the same, so you can do this. Like, everyone can do this. Just takes the time and maybe a whole team to work on it, but you can do this. And that's why I think Turbo City is such a good example.
This was 2 or 3 people who, by the end of that day and a half, it was 99% here. They might have
Yeah.
touched one or two things, but I played it at the end of that day, and
Same.
it was this track. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And so it's really powerful what people can do.
And so I want to jump, looking at our time, 'cause still questions. We'll show one, maybe one more, one or two.
Yeah.
One that we were referencing earlier, and that is, I believe, Project. I want to see. The thing is, these names aren't what was published, because that's just how it works. Sometimes you make a project. I mean, if it was named that published, then every track would be named Final Track version 2, Real 1 this time, Final 2, which probably wouldn't be the most compelling name for a track, but maybe it is. If one of you publish that, let me know. I'll play it with that name, whatever that track looks like. But this is the one we were alluding to, where they did a lot of great smoke and mirrors to turn a normal 3-lap into feeling like it is one single lap and you don't realize you're looping. And they do it a clever way, using teleport checkpoints that you keep thinking, hey, the teleport is changing. If you've played any of these tracks, me just loading into this cube room, you probably already know. They're also one that use an active track volume, as you see right there. But let's see if I can get to their start point. Let's hope they're better than me, and they put everything in a nice little folder. Oh, they have one called Start Line. Perfect. Yeah, let's just F to there. So here we have their start line, and as you can see, it's actually, they have made this, I believe, is not an actual checkpoint, or it might be, but one without. No, it is a checkpoint, but it
That's
goes
the
to
start and finish line.
the
But
start and
what's
finish
cool
line.
is the checkpoint at the end of it is
Yeah.
a teleport checkpoint that essentially will teleport you to the next one you're going to, and you'll come back through here and move to the to another one, ending up, they actually, in order to accomplish this, that is the finish line. They created more than one of these ships that is a start, and so when you go through it after the first lap, you actually teleport to a duplicate of this that is the second lap, and that's why it feels like you started a second lap, but it's actually teleporting you between.
So you see
different
this
starts.
is set checkpoint 4, 18, and 19. It has different indexes of which ones it goes to. So it will set to, so that, I'm gonna try to zoom out. It's a little, oh yeah, here you go. Here's another one of the identical ships, and they just set it up with that. And as you see, here's a very large checkpoint, so you don't even see it. You don't see that you're going through a checkpoint, you just see the checkered mesh. And so your mind goes, oh, it's checkered mesh, and this is set up very similar to the last one I went through. This must be the same one. And then you go through teleport, you go somewhere else. So you're doing 3 full laps, but you don't realize you're going 3 full laps. Let's see if I can find the third ship. It's a little hard just because of all the set dressing, as you know, can be hard to navigate, and they put everything in their own bubble. It can be hard to navigate someone else's project if you don't know how they set it all up. That's just game dev right there. They also did something I really enjoyed. You can see it sometimes, but I don't know why this, like, I never thought of this, but they turned the cube so it looks in some of the places where they put it, the EMP hazard, like right here, looks like a pyramid, like a triangle. I remember I went through once, I'm like, when did we add triangle shapes? Did they put in a new mesh? They couldn't have. And it ended up like, I realized while going through like this, like, oh, they just rotated a cube. That's so simple, but genius. And yeah, this one, because again, a little hard to show, if you don't know it, we could just play it. Upload the private version just to get a code. It'll be honestly very quick, and then we can throw this.
Technically, it is
in.
live anyways, so you could have just loaded into it.
Oh, that's true. A validation failed. Yeah, we could just load into that. How about that? Wait, but if validation failed, is it gonna fail in launch session? Oh, I know why it's failing. This is not the latest version. So this has nothing to do with their project. As you see down here, I have not synced latest. So it's not going to let us launch. So unfortunately,
Well, if you haven't checked them out yet, these are all super easy to find once you bring up rocket racing.
Yeah.
The gameplay,
Yeah.
right. You just got to look for that "What's Possible in UEFN" playlist, and all the game jam tracks are right there for you to check out.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just really to show off, kind of get us in a project of what, utilizing everything we kind of shown today. How did they actually create some of these, and they went really advanced with this one on some unique smoke and mirrors, and Turbo City we just saw some more
stable
classic
roll all over.
Love the track layout here.
Yeah. Get another Sky City. Brings us to Cube Town.
Cube Town.
Ooh, there we go.
Just sometimes hard to find.
Well, it's also some maps my camera speed being high is good. Other maps it's not. But here where they used completely, like we showed, active track volume, and everything, and using good signage to let you know, hey, where do I need to go? But it's pretty clear. It's like what I was saying earlier, where set dressing when you don't have a track piece to show, yeah, this is where you go, where I did not have in that. And one last thing we can show is they put in some skyboxes they put into this. Trying to see if I can find an easy one to like jump to. Might not be. I'll just, again, apologies for the clipping. While I do this, look, a cat is back. Isn't that great? As long as he doesn't sit on the keyboard, which he is. Yeah, this is one, like, yeah, they put in, I believe,
these sky domes to kind of hide
cubes, and you click that, they Boolean, go to another one, one on top of one other. Like they just layered it so well, and you can just jump to one to another. So every time you're in one of these little, like, basically these bubbles they created of small tracks, you got this skybox, which is great that they put in, and skybox where they put in the their material. That's the ship instance that they named it.
So there's some really unique things you can go to by hiding things using other skyboxes and creating all sorts of fun little hidden things with teleport checkpoints. So this is a good highlight of both utilization of teleport checkpoints and active track volumes, and really what you can do with that to create some unique tracks themselves. And
Very
I believe,
cool. Yeah,
go ahead, Devin.
I was going to say, unless you want to take us through any other tracks, do we want to go back to questions? Or
yeah, I think back to questions. I know we are close to reaching time.
Yeah. All right. Then we've got a few. I figure we'll go back to rapid fire. You know, don't think too hard on it. What first comes to mind? So first here is there a reason that the minimum and maximum values are set to percentages like 0.3 instead of something like just 0?
There are certain restrictions within the mechanics that we need it to at least function fully properly, and it was brought down to our engineer worked specifically on these mins and maxes on basically what was desired. If you go certain ones, if you take the scalars all the way down, will essentially make the car not function. So they are capped for multitude of reasons depending on how that variable is used within the physics simulation code.
Right, next question. Is there a way to make it so that when the car hits a bit of water, it just goes slower instead of killing off the character? I guess if they wanted to use it as a sort of hazard.
Right now, you could you could essentially, there is an option on the well, that's on the vehicle spawner, but there's right now, I think the only way you could do that is you could put some hazards inside water and then
And
turn
hide
them
them.
invisible, and then essentially they would EMP you like normal. That is currently, with the set of devices, what could be possible.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I like that. Feels creative.
Yeah, it's similar with like the boost pads in the goo. It's a way of, you can like smoke and mirrors it. You find a way to like, okay, I made them hidden on the water, and that will hit the same function we want to hit.
Is there a way to disable latch altogether?
Yes. So if you turn that down to 0, that value, you will not latch to anything. You might want it not at 0, in the sense of like, you might want a little bit so that you latch to the regular ground when you fall onto it. That way, if you fall off a wall or something, you actually get back on ground nicely. But you can turn it completely off, and you can turn sticky wheels or counter gravity completely off, which then, like right now, if you go over a hill, you'll stay on the hill. But if you turn it off, you would launch off the hill, kind of more similar to how the BR cars launch off hills.
Very cool. Can the day sequence device be exposed in rocket racing projects in order to control time of day?
So
Yes, to a degree, or not. There is stuff we can do with.
You can mess with time of day in
Yes.
the templates as is right now. Off the top of my head, I don't believe that is the time of day sequence device, but it's the time of day manager within the world settings. You can mess with the island settings, not world settings, but in the island settings, you can mess with time of day and change it. So you can create night maps or day maps. Like I believe Turbo City was set to night.
Yes, it is something. Hold on. It is something we want more. It is something you can mess with, and we fixed some issues with it initially, but it is also, like Aiden said, maybe something we want to look into more. But you can change, like Turbo City is a perfect example. Turbo City is a night map.
Awesome.
You can also utilize custom skyboxes to fake unique lighting in ways you want. I've seen creators do that as well, but you can mess with the time of day manager.
Awesome. All right, I've got 2 more questions. We're almost there, y'all. Is there a way to add a physical podium where we can allow our players to show off emotes or skins after winning?
There is not currently a way to do that. If there is, it would come to us first, and it would release at the same time if that became something that became available to users. But we can't talk about, or we basically can't confirm or deny if anything like that is happening right now.
All right.
NDA.
And then the last question here is, do you think there will ever be an opportunity to edit current maps in ranked, like use them as a prefab or something like that?
I saw this question and I think it's a great idea. I like it personally. I do not have an answer on if that will happen, but I think it's a good idea. And
yeah, I agree. I really like the idea too.
I will bring it up the chain, but right now it is just an idea.
Awesome. All right. Well, that is all of the questions that we have for y'all. Thank you so much for going through those.
Yeah,
All
thank
right.
you for having us here, and glad we got to show off the tools, and I hope to see some cool, unique things come out of this, and hopefully there are some new ways people are utilizing those tools and the advanced features we showed, and hopefully it can help people make stuff that they are imagining, whatever comes to mind.
I think that's my favorite thing about these tools in general, is just like the tools really line up with how I would make a track in my mind, just in terms of being able to stretch a piece of track out, having it twist and turn without having to do a lot of steps in between. So shout out to our teams for making an incredible tool set. I know our players and our creators are having a ton of fun making these maps or playing on creator-made maps. Also, shout out to all the Game Jam folks we got to work with on these really cool
Yeah, it was fantastic. They are
tracks in San Diego.
just seeing them work. It was incredible. Like the speed that they picked up. Like some of them, like hadn't really done too or one or two didn't do a lot in UEFN yet, and like they just hit the ground running.
Yeah, as one who has been fixing a lot of the bugs with the track editor tool when they got their hands on it, I couldn't believe that they made some of the things they did. And I was like,
Yeah.
Whew, amazing.
Yeah. There's a reason I'm a programmer. Because I can't do all that right off the bat. They blow me away every time I saw it. I was like, what?
Yeah, jams in general are insane. So being able to see the stuff that they can create in those time spans is absolutely wild. But thank you all so much for coming on today and talking about this and demoing these incredible tools and hopefully giving some creators some ideas that they can take back and make some fun stuff with themselves. Devin, I want to make sure I hand it over to you. Is there anything else that you want to add or chat about at the end here?
Yeah, just if you're playing along with us, you're playing Rocket Racing, you're creating new tracks, be sure to hop on the Rocket Racing community channels with us, the Rocket Racing Discord server, Rocket Racing subreddit. We're really active in both of those places. The Discord definitely has a spot where you can show off any tracks that you've made and get people hyped up for checking them out and maybe doing some troubleshooting as well. And yeah, thanks to Galen, Donnie, and Quinn for joining us today and walking us through these really cool tools.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and thank you,
everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was cool to come on and talk about what's been like our life for a while now.
Yeah.
And cool to see all the excitement in chat and all the questions. It seems like as creators, you all are very excited to get hands on these tools and want even more options. And it's exciting to see where it will all go. And I hope you all learned something new today. So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with that, thank you everybody for watching and participating. And we hope we'll see you around on the next one. Enjoy the rest of your day and make some cool stuff. Bye, everybody.
Have a good one.